Good evening again, everyone. We want to welcome you to another edition of MLK Talk. This is a program that discusses all things Lutheran. Today, with us, we have in our studio our ambassador there in Freetown, Sierra Leone, Ambassador Jerry Tableau. We are glad he's back with us today. Um, our brother Josiah Joker is there in Dansbury, Connecticut. He's going to be our lead host again today. And we have our lone sister, Couple Saleh. She's joining us again. We are glad, thank God for speedy recovery as she can be here with
Yeah,
us today.
couple,
Yes,
welcome
we're
back.
so glad she's here with us. um, as you all can see, we have our guest there, but our lead host will be introducing our guest, and he will be taking the show from here. Brother Joker, how are you doing today?
I am doing wonderfully well today, Willie, and the weather is around 50 degrees in Danbury, Connecticut today, so it's a lovely, nice today. I don't know about you there in
No,
Atlanta.
ask me. Ask me. I will send you. I will send you some good weather. I will send you some good weather from Georgia. You know, we have it down here. We have it down here, so I'll send you some good weather.
Wonderful. I know the ambassador and couple are always doing well in Liberia and Sierra Leone. I love the weather back home, and I envy you guys for that. All year round, you always have, nice weather condition. But today, folks, again, you are turned to my Lutheran Connections online TV. This is MLC Talk. MLC Talk is coming to you as usual today on your favorite network, My Lutheran Connections Online TV. Today we are having a special conversation. Today we're not doing a parish talk, we're not doing an auxiliary talk, we're not having the bishop hour. We are having a special conversation with a special person, and she
Yeah.
is going to introduce herself. We will give her that opportunity to introduce herself. So today we're going to be looking at a very good topic, discussing a phenomenon, climate justice, and climate justice intersection with faith. We're going to get some understanding from our guests regarding the topic. So it's over to you, Phoebe. We want to know who you are first. Please introduce yourself to our audience. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm really very honored to be here and appreciate you asking me to be here. I am coming in from the Boston area, which is on the East Coast of the U.S., and it is a beautiful day here as well. It hasn't been, so I'm grateful that the sun is shining, and we actually want to be outside. My calling to this ministry, Creation Care, started a long time ago before I even knew that I was a Lutheran, what being Lutheran meant. I've always loved and felt more connected to my faith when I was outside. So I grew up with that as a desire to be outside. But as it was about a decade ago that I was invited to go to a Lutheran camp. And fortunately, I was able to have someone take care of my little daughter who wasn't sleeping through the night. So I was really grateful, actually, to be able to go anywhere where I could sleep through the night. And I learned what this organization here called Lutherans Restoring Creation was, which was a group of people who wanted to see caring for creation just more into the work of what all the church does. So we had written things, the church had written things about what it meant to care for creation, but we weren't really doing that. So I was really excited to be able to see that happening in the church that I happen to be going to, and wanted to share that with more people. So that was about a decade ago that I took the baton of helping with the U.S. network of Lutherans Restoring Creation. And then just about 2 years ago, almost 3 years ago, with COVID in between, I forget timing. But I was invited by Cynthia Molabita, who at the time, she was just a professor of environmental ethics. I forget her whole title, but a professor at the Pacific Lutheran Theological Seminary. And she asked myself and a couple other folks from Lutheran World Federation if we thought that it would make sense to have a Center for Climate Justice and Faith. This term has been thrown out there amongst a lot of different people, and lots of people were using it, but especially the intersection of faith, we really wanted to tackle what that meant. And it would take maybe 30 weeks or so of taking a course to somehow come up with what your definition of climate justice would be. But that's what this course that I am now coordinator of, it's a course for people that might only have maybe a couple hours a week to consider what their faith has to do with climate justice and what climate justice means where they are. And that's the course that we're able to provide for people, especially Lutherans. We do open it up to people of all faiths or no faiths, but we speak a lot of Lutheran. So I'm grateful to be on with all of you today and speak about the special Lutheran connection with what climate justice might mean to you. From where I'm coming from, it means to me that I know that it is unjust that the people most least responsible for the state of our world, for rising temperatures and rising sea levels, those people least responsible are usually at the front line of the damage. So in a few words, that's what climate injustice means to me. But sharing a vision of what climate justice looks like takes a lot longer. And that's what this course is about, especially how we do that with our faith and why it's a matter of faith. Sorry, that was a really long introduction.
Wonderful. Yeah. Yeah. I pick up the decade-long engagement with the U.S. network of Lutherans restoring, creation. That's a good part of it, great experience, and then coming into the climate justice sphere. I thought that was important. The link was quite important. And you just talk about climate injustice, which is good. I think that was the best way to initiate the conversation. Now that leads us to the question for today. What is climate justice? What actually it is? How simple can you explain to us, for our audience to understand what is climate justice?
So again, it could take a very long time and many, many books to come up with all the different facets of what climate justice is, but it essentially is the understanding that that we're not sharing our resources as if we were to love our neighbor. And when we understand that in a global economy where we're all sharing so many different assets, it's not just the people that you can see that you're connected with, that all of us impact each other because we're really connected on a very ecological sense. We're all connected, but especially because of a global economy, we're very quickly connecting all of each other and impacting one another with what decisions we make as to what to buy and what decisions our government leaders make really impacts how the rest of the people on the planet get to live. And one example of that is if you imagine where most people live are along the coastline. And most of the people living in coastal and island communities are going to be the first hit as the sea level is rising. As we've already seen, island communities have to leave their homes. Those are not the people that have the most resources to be able to just pick up and leave and be saved. And they're also not the ones that have used the most resources or had expended the most carbon and methane, those gases that are leading to the increased temperatures that are leading to sea level rise. Those are not the communities that used all that stuff. It's just when it comes down to a matter of justice. And I was thinking of this as earlier this morning in church, we listened to the story of the Passion. And it does strike me that when we listen to the Passion story, it's also unjust, isn't it? It's also unjust. And so there are a lot of stories in the Bible that can lead us to the understanding and remind us that while we try to make everything fair, we do have to understand that things that's a human need and a human desire to be fair to one another. And we can't just wait, or we can't just hand it all over for God to fix everything. It has to be with our hands as well. And to see God in others and as us in community doing this, that is where the intersection of faith comes in. That rather than just saying, well, we'll see what happens and it's up to God, that we are taking a role in it, and it is part of our relationship, our spiritual relationship, but also our relationship with each other. I remember one of your other guests talking about the people to people relationship of the horizontal part of the cross and the vertical one. And this very much has to do more so with our relationship with each other and our right relationship with each other. That what climate justice is about, and to know one another better, which is why I'm so honored to be part of the network that we have at the Center for Climate Justice and Faith. The certificate program is able to connect people like this online, where I would never be able to meet you all in the flesh. You live all over the globe, but we are able to connect every other week with one another. Those of us who want to see change happen where we live, we can connect with each other and share ideas about how can we do our part, whether it's getting our religious leaders to talk more about it in church, whether it's to actually go into the streets. I know there's a community right now in Minnesota that's fighting for their community garden to be saved, and they're bringing palms. They're bringing their procession of palms to their community garden today. These are all different. The what climate justice looks like and working for it really depends on where you are. But we can still come together from across the globe and share one another's stories, because we do share a common faith as to what fuel we can use to enact what we want to see as climate justice. Does that make sense?
It really does. And I like to begin my follow-up, with the reference that you made regarding the vertical and horizontal approaches that one of our guests, discussed on the show, which tells me that you follow our show very religiously.
The last couple ones I caught up on. Yes.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. So the understanding I'm gathering here is that this is basically about the distribution of resources, making sure that there's equality, fairness, and justice in the way we interact with each other, and we ensure that resources are distributed, in a satisfactory way. But this will depend on the different governance ecosystems, the way they go about it, and also the role of religious institutions. And I think that's where you bring faith into the whole thing, the role that faith plays. I thought that was quite impressive. That's what I get from there, and I think that's important for our audience as well. So I would like to go over to my colleague, the ambassador is off. He's having technical issues. Willie, are you there?
Yeah, I think he's
The
having
ambassador,
I'm trying to reach out to him. I think he's having some technical
okay,
issues.
so you can take care of that. Sis couple, are you ready to go? Okay, wonderful.
Yes, Brother God.
Right. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Phoebe. Thank you so much for that background of climate justice and faith and where the faith perspective comes in. As we all know that the issue of climate justice is like everyone business. We all need to put our minds, our thoughts, our work together when it comes to justice for the environment or these um, climate issues or climate impacts that has a greater impact on our community or our environment. So the church standpoints, the church need to come in, the church need to be active when it comes to this climate impact. The church cannot sit down and just fold their hands and sit back when everything affects all of us. It affects the society, it even affects our church, and we just sit back and fold our hands. So my question is, what can what can a faith-based organization do in supporting our government when it comes to these climate, these compliance that has to do with climate impacts? What can our faith-based organization do in helping government to combat the issue of climate change, also come up with these climate justices?
So a few different answers
I
to
mean,
that.
Kobe?
Yeah, yeah. Can you hear me okay? Okay. I do want to again go back to how important it is knowing your context. So my answer might, shift depending on where you are and what leaders you already work with. So I would first start overall by hoping that your religious leaders know and have a personal understanding of what climate justice looks like to them, and for people that they get to be in church with, for people that they preach to every day, to be able to share their awareness of what climate justice looks like for them is probably the first step. And I'm sure it depends on who your preacher is, whether or not they're going to take the lead from people in the pews. But I do hope that they listen to everyone's story and hear that there is a need to talk about this from the pew, or from the pulpit as well. So to build awareness from those of you that are in congregations and listening to a pastor and want to be heard also by that pastor, I think building that relationship and sharing your stories of climate injustice is really important as a first step to build that awareness, but also to invite any environmental organizations to use your church to be able to communicate with people in your church, to welcome those organizations into church, but also have your church as people move and work with those environmental organizations. I know that sometimes, depending on where you live, it can feel like it's a political move or something that has to do with taking political sides. But if you just get out there and start cleaning stuff up together, that's a good way to start with, or plant trees together. Let's hope that that doesn't feel like something that is choosing one side over another. So to start there with your church, but also I know how important it is to have religious leaders show up to, national events and make sure they're actually talking to government leaders. And I think it is the religious leaders that can take the stories from the field, really, and bring them to these tables. And that's them being able to use their power. When you're a religious leader, you get to have that power and sit at those tables and to make the connection between drought and not having enough food or healthcare issues. There are a lot of connections that have to do with how we share or don't share resources well. That is really up to a religious leader to bring to government leaders as well. Like you said, not just fold your hands, Corporal, right? And I appreciate too how important it is not just to say you represent this story, but to bring those people from the story to the tables as well, so that people's voices, especially women, and people that are feeling the brunt of climate change the most, can be heard at those tables. Does that answer some question?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
There you go, couple.
yeah. A follow up. Let me just do. Let me do a follow up for me. Okay, as LWF sees Kiev as a core calling, it recognizes climate change as a matter of justice and human rights. So advocate for climate change, the protection of the most vulnerable impact climate change in holding accountable. We as member of the LWF, how can central LWF bring it down to everything that is this with, can we bring to our group?
Couple
As
seems to be
has her
coming in
own member, right?
Uh,
Who is to who, Yeah. So how can she ensure that it comes down to her member group? It implements advocacy when it comes to climate justice.
I think I got half of the question. Um, and oh, is she paused now too? Hold on. I think I heard the last part of the question as to how to be an advocate, essentially.
Yeah. Yes, how can LWF help a member churches when it comes to the advocacy of climate justice and faith? Saying the core value is to hold government to their feet in ensuring that these climate that these climate impact, the account government account for these climate commitment, right? So how can it come to WF member churches in carrying on the advocacy when it comes to climate justice and faith?
I think that we're seeing part of that in how LWF has been supporting this kind of educational program, because I think that part of the advocacy work is to make sure you give voice to the people that need to be heard, and that giving the education and a platform like the Center for Climate Justice and Faith, where people can connect with one another across the globe to know what is eco-theology, or what and what does it look like, and what is the UN asking of non-governmental organizations to tell us. So some of that I think is educational, but I think that the next step is then to really encourage religious leaders to be able to come to those tables. And I think that it takes a lot more doing to get the very busy religious leaders to be able to stop and understand how best to advocate, there's so much science changing all the time, and it's so context based, that I think that's a big jump to educate people about what awareness means, and then educate the religious leaders as to how to communicate that when they're at a national government type table. So I think they're working on it, but I do think there's a long way to go. And I think I'd like to hear from you what you think about what more can be done to encourage and equip the religious leaders to show up at the table. I'm just going to throw that question back at you, Corporal.
Okay. From my end, what I would suggest that the LWF send the information, like the plan we are now, where they won't share it with me. I never had access to it. Where they share it with me, I apply, I did all nationality, and at the end of the day, I was accepted. So if Woody had not done that, I wouldn't have known about it. So
Right.
my suggestion is it be sent to the various member groups and give people the will to apply. And when they are accepted, they go through the training. That alone can help. But instead, just restricted to certain group of people. That's just my suggestion.
It's wonderful. And I think that what this center has started, it was just last year that we got started. I would like to see more and more of them happen. I think especially in context. I mean, in certain cohorts, so that it's wonderful to be with each other from across the globe. And I think that there need to be more time. I mean, seeing what you and Willie have been able to do because you share a particular, spot on the planet together. I think it's important to also leverage, a small group regionally. So I would love to see it expand so that there could be more cohorts that are also regionally placed. I don't have access to that kind of funding, but I'll put it out there. Right. I think that would help.
Wonderful. I thought, couple, those were great questions. You were able to provoke Phoebe in a way that she provided some great insights, about the role of religious leaders. And I think it's fundamental in terms of acquiring the necessary information about climate justice, because you cannot even do promotion of climate justice or implement climate justice program when you don't have the awareness, you don't have the necessary information. So I think that's fundamental for the religious institutions to consider that as premium in their efforts to initiate climate justice and faith-related initiative. So I thought those questions were valid. And Phoebe, thank you for those effective responses. We'll go over to the ambassador. In Freetown, he has some questions for you as well. Ambassador, it's over to you.
Thank you very much. And I want to express my regrets. I think I got some serious internet glitches. But can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Very yes, well. Ambassador, we hear you well.
Okay, that's great. I might have missed some of the great responses and the question that came, but I think the little that I gather, it seems to be very interesting. And the debate of climate justice and then looking at the nexus between faith and climate justice is very essential. I know in many ways you try to give, the importance, but I just want to, for the sake of emphasis, come back to the question and perhaps maybe be a bit specific. I would like to understand, or the viewers out there would like to understand, firstly, what is this whole talk of climate justice? Why do we think it's important to save the climate, if that is the case? I mean, these are issues that I think the viewing populace will want to know from you. And if it is possible, can you give us some of the impacts, either negative or positive, it has on Africa, on Liberia, so to speak?
So first off, I will tell you specifically, you all could probably tell me a lot more. I have never been outside of the US, really. So as far as specifics, I can read about it, but you live in the place where you live and you know your climate justice story. But to come back more specifically to the idea of what climate justice means, it doesn't reflect, there doesn't need to be justice for the climate. It is the fact that the changing climate and what is happening because of a changing climate is impacting people unfairly. Those people that have had the least to do with the climate changing at all are the ones that are experiencing drought immediately. They're the ones experiencing sea level change immediately, taking their communities away and them not having a place to go. So it isn't, and from my personal perspective, I believe that the planet will be fine with or without us. I think that, as far as justice for the earth, it's probably going to shake us off within, a few thousand years anyways. However, that our relationship that we are looking to restore right relationship with God's good creation. And that does start with each other. So that the work of climate justice does, unfortunately, the environmental movement has had a long line of focusing on non-human, on focusing on pictures of a polar bear on an ice cap melting. But what climate justice tries to bring back to the conversation is that this really has a lot more to do with how people treat one another than some far off lands that icebergs that we're never going to get to. If we start to have a better relationship with each other and the gifts that God gave us, and be better at sharing the gifts God gave us with each other justly, we wouldn't necessarily have the climate crisis that we do, and would know how to deal better with it. So of course, people of faith that talk about loving each other and loving neighbor, and not that Lutherans have a specific right to care for creation, but we do have some great writing about saint and sinner at the same time, about this understanding of grace and this understanding of the theology of the cross. There's a lot of work that Luther, I mean, supposedly Luther said, let me find it here, that if, and there could have been other people that said this too, but supposedly Luther said, if the world were to end tomorrow, he apparently replied, what would you do? I would plant a tree. So there is the understanding that not only does our faith bring us together, but our faith can also remind us that what we see here isn't the end. It also helps me in my work. I used to be in environmental research before I connected my faith to this work. And I used to work with a lot of scientists who I honestly didn't feel comfortable saying I was religious because it was looked down on. I was really grateful when I found other people in my Lutheran faith that found a deep connection and found knowing more about science actually supported their faith. That helps lift me up to recognize that this work I'm not going to necessarily see the fruits of this work, that we're all part of a much larger picture. And being fueled by my faith helps me get through knowing that I might not see the good news while I'm still here, but that doesn't mean it's not worth doing while we're here. I think I went off on a tangent a little bit there. I'm sorry, Ambassador. Did I answer your question at all?
Oh, Josiah, I think Josiah, I think you take it off. Let me try to see if I can refresh. I didn't get half of what was explained. It's difficult for me to give follow up. I didn't understand if you even asked me a question.
Right.
Unfortunately, I won't be able to answer. Let me refresh and see if I can come back, and perhaps I'll be able to answer your question.
Absolutely right, Ambassador. Yeah.
Sorry.
So Phoebe, I think that was a very good explanation to Ambassador's question. But I just wanted to read a quote here from the Center for Climate Safety. And here's what it says. Yeah, it says, quote, climate change is a political choice. This is just about the environment. It's about the community. It's about jobs. It's about justice. Although the magnitude of climate change may make individuals feel helpless, individual action is critical for meaningful change. And the last unquote, and the last sentence there, I think is in sync with what you said. Lastly, I think our role matters as well in terms of what each of us do to preserve, the universe. What each of us do to help each other. It's all about ensuring equality, fairness, and justice in our actions, in our interactions, and the way people who have responsibility, like authorities. I think that's the political dimension that the Climate Safety Center talk about. Those with the responsibility, the mandate to deliver, the social services like healthcare, education, providing jobs, creating jobs, and creating the enabling environment for people to be happy, for people to have right to the pursuit of life, as is required. So our religious leaders in context also have similar responsibility, because that's a leadership role they have to play in ensuring that there is this equal and fair treatment in every aspect of the life of their members, like us Lutherans, parishioners, and things the way we do. But my concern has to do with how they can leverage the kind of information that you are providing, as a religious institution. This may require some policy action. Say, for example, and Willie are benefiting immensely from the program that they're participating in. But if the church is not willing to accommodate Kopo and Willie in a way that they can lead the way to establish a very good climate justice and faith program in the Lutheran Church, it's going to be impossible for us to realize anything from what we're talking about here. That is just a classic example that I wanted to highlight. I know Kopo and Wole can talk about it more because they are in the program, but I think the church has a policy on climate justice. And under that policy implementation, in the framework of that policy implementation, I think the role of people like Kopo and Willie are very, very essential. They can even lead the process to derive a plan as to how to proceed about it with the kind of knowledge and experience that they are acquiring. So I just wanted to chime in on that aspect. But how do you think from the Pacific Lutheran Theological Seminary standpoint, is it possible for the institution to have any direct partnership with the LTL in Liberia to work on a climate justice program?
I wouldn't know how to answer that from the institution's perspective, as I'm a coordinator. And mind you, I've never even been on the campus. This is how weird this. I mean, it's wonderful and weird. I've never set foot on the actual campus. I get to have this position, and I'm on the other coast. But I do think that because it's that our reach can be that far and wide. I also think that now that we've been able to have this program running for a couple of years, I don't see why we couldn't just have a same similar program happen in Liberia and be able to be headed up by, I mean, the actual process and what we're asking many of our students to do, if they want to do what we have been learning for the first 15 weeks and do it on their own and keep sharing it. That's the point. I mean, we're doing evangelism ultimately, and there shouldn't be a copyright on that. So that there is no stopping. However, right, as far as being able to have, access to more people, I do think that it would be I'll certainly put a plug for being able to have more of a direct institutional connection to Pacific Lutheran Theological Seminary. But as an educational institution, we would certainly, I know, want to lift that up and have more education, period. And I think that ultimately the cost of this we're doing this right now. This is people talking to each other and knowing how to do this is half the battle. But I do think that there's only so far, one little seminary in Berkeley, California can do. The whole idea was to find people like Willie and Corpo to make it keep happening in other places. So right. This was the seed that we wanted to keep germinating. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I actually asked that question intentionally, so I will bring Willie in with his round of questioning.
Thank you so much, Bijo, and thank you so much, Phoebe. Thank you for answering all of those questions and providing insight on the work that we are doing at the level of the climate justice and faith, program, Pacific Theological Seminary. My question for you comes from a biblical standpoint at looking at our topic for today, the intersection of our faith in climate justice. Where does where is that intersection? One, and then the second part is what is that responsibility, that ties our faith? Maybe, you can add from a biblical endpoint, what is that responsibility that add our faith to the work in which, we are doing today, when it comes to climate justice initiative?
I will come back to what our other guests were saying too, the fact that it's a human rights issue. So if we are to say that we love our neighbor and care for our neighbor, we need to care for the climate, because we all live here and it is our common home. So now, as far as I first referred to a little bit of climate, the intersection and being able to know you have faith and strengthen your faith to do climate justice work is one thing. And I think it's important to know that we have each other as a community, and we're fueled by faith. But ultimately, it is the responsibility of people of faith as well. If you're going to say that you love neighbor, you have to do this work. And it is this, I think, you know, when we were just teaching the Good Samaritan story, it's a lot easier to walk by these problems when you might be comfortable, when you don't see someone on the ground. But the point is, our work in the church is to be able to look up and see our neighbor and tell each other who our neighbor is and what is their story. And that's where our faith, I mean, that's where I was first struck with frustration at not seeing in words what I saw that the ELCA was putting out in words to care for creation. But I was a little frustrated with not seeing it enough in action, which is what got a lot of us together, at least within the ELCA, to say, we have a great, it's a 20-page wonderful, if you ever, you know, want to read really why the intersection of faith and creation care is there, read that. But we can write about it, we have to do it as well, like a lot of, you know, our faith in action. But it's a matter of knowing how to love thy neighbor.
Thank you so much. Phoebe. So to our program, the program that you are chairing right now, that you are coordinating, and so do you mind just sharing a little information on it, and the length of the program, and just giving a little bit of information about the program.
Sure. And Willie, just so my computer doesn't freeze, will you feel free to share the link to
Absolutely.
our center's page? Thank you so much, because I'm afraid my computer will stop. Okay.
Yes, I definitely will.
So yeah, as I have to admit, I feel like I just get to invite people to a party online. Ultimately, it's not a very difficult job, but I'm really grateful I get to have it. In partnership with Lutheran World Federation and ELCA World Hunger, the Pacific Lutheran Theological Seminary has been able to invite people from all different paths in their church life, whether they're a pastor or retired or somebody in the pew or not Lutheran ever, and just interested in knowing how their faith might intersect with climate justice work in their community. You apply for the program via an online application, which the link that Willie will give soon will have the application on there before the end of April. And you apply for the program, and as long as there is a limiting factor that you have to have a good internet connection at least every other week to be able to connect via Zoom. And we understand that still doesn't mean it's accessible to all. So there is that, and there's only so far we can go with that. But the understanding is that our first semester together, which is 15 weeks long, within about 2 to 3 hours a week, we expect you to read and then go on an online classroom and respond that way within your cohort of about 30 other, or the class itself has 30 other people from across the globe. And you can write on there and hear each other's reactions to the readings. But then every other week, we actually get in small cohort groups. So a Zoom session similar to this, where we get to hear from one another. And those are really the experts in the room. It's great to read theological writings, but to be able to hear from one another's perspective is where I find strength, and am honored to get to know people from across the globe who are concerned about this. And then the next semester, the next 15 weeks, you really focus in on what can you do, because it's overwhelming to read the statistics about what the UN is asking everyone on the planet to do. As an individual, within your church community, how can you inspire local action where you are, or continue the local action that you've started? So we ask the first semester to take in information. The second semester is to really make sure you're doing work where you are. And for a lot of the people in the course, they're full-time something else. They're, some people are pastoring 2 or 3 other congregations. Some people are doing IT work professionally. Some people are, doctors. So there are many different people taking this course, but they want to be sure they fit it in to their lives and can be held accountable to each other, and feed off of each other's, either your advice or frustrations that lead to advice. But that is and it's just by the end of May, we'll be able to share presentations with one another to hear what each other's been doing, or at least been able to get started.
Thank you so much, Phoebe. Thank you so much for providing insight on the program. Big Joe, you are muted. You are muted. You are on mute, Big Joe. Big Joe, you are muted.
You're
Oh,
muted. Oh.
yes, yes, you are on mute, Joe.
Oh
Okay.
my oh my goodness. I was just talking to myself. Yeah. And I was saying I was really carried away by the interaction, the conversation between you and Phoebe, and then so maybe that's why I was muted and I didn't even notice it. Yeah, but great insights, Phoebe, like I said from the outset. Willie, Phoebe, know that after you leave, we will be charging Willie for that promotion.
Excellent.
Not the two you just did. Not the two of you just did. that was a
Yeah,
joke. I think it's
yeah,
important to talk about the
yeah.
Pacific Lutheran Theological Seminary, the program that Phoebe, you're working on a lot. I think there can be synergies built between the two institutions depending on the success of Willie and Corpo's initiative back home after the program. I think it's good to continue to talk about it. So I would like for us to go back to Willie, so that we can recognize our viewers. And there seem to be few comments that probably Phoebe can read and see if she wants to provide any additional comments.
Sure, absolutely. So we have our sister Marlene Mulva. She is following us there. She's in Rhode Island. She's following us, and we just looking at the time. We're gonna take few of our viewers anyway. So our mother Viliga Bien, she's also following us from Pennsylvania. This is our pastor, the Reverend Thomas EP. He's the director or the student liaison at the United Methodist University Bangor School of Theology campus. So he's there in Liberia. And also our brother Elijah Zina. Elijah is there in Minneapolis. And he has a comment here. He says, um, climate justice is fundamental to the church and society. Religious leaders must continue to engage their negotiators at the table to create more ambitious outcome for the COP. I think that's a conference of parties negotiations. So yeah, that and also this is one of our reverends. He's there in Gaytown Old Road. That's a part in Monrovia, Liberia, called Gaytown Old Road, and his name is Sumo Kokolo. He's one of our pastors there. And I don't know if you ever heard of the Reverend Marina Rao. She was a missionary from Germany, so she was assigned at this parish as well, this congregation there. Um, and also we have our pastor here again. He has a comment. Pastor P. He says, um, as I listen to you, I'm beginning to think about more about the current war between Ukraine and Russia. It is no doubt that the weapons being used and the effect on the climate, humanity, and the habitat will negatively go a long way in global community. Uh, War do create havoc on the climate. What is your reaction? So he's
That's a
asking.
question for you.
That's the
Phoebe.
question for you, Fubi. Yeah. He said, what's your reaction that war creates havoc on the climate?
So
So
I
maybe you can just note it. You can just
yeah,
note it. We'll come back to
the
you.
question that we get back to your closing
Mhm.
comment, then you can just
Mhm.
all right. Then our brother Elijah again, he came up, he said, I believe the Lutheran World Federation and ELCA have been doing great on the front of climate justice by supporting young people to engage in the work of climate justice. I was part of the first group of young people who represented the Lutheran World Federation at COP19, where we launched the Fast for Climate. Okay, Fast for Climate campaign. But I believe funding is a major problem for churches to continue this work of climate justice. Yes, you are right, brother Elijah Zena. So yes, and we will be getting to brother Elijah Zena too at some point, knowing the fact that he attended this event. He was one of those young people who attended the event. I think he will also be a resource person to but anyway, couple will talk about it at the end of our program. Just sorry, go ahead.
Oh, thank you very much, folks.
Yeah.
You are turned to my Lutheran Connections online TV. This is MLC Talk. We come to you at this hour on every Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time here in the United States, and 8 p.m. GMT or Liberian time there in Liberia in West Africa. So today we are having Phoebe here. She's doing extremely well, providing information on climate justice, the intersection of climate justice and faith. So, Willie, we can use the remaining 9 minutes to hear from Phoebe on, her reaction to the comments, and then after that, we can have her, give her parting comments. Then we close the program. Would that be okay,
Sure,
couple?
absolutely. Sure, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Right. Wonderful. Okay, Phoebe, it's over to you.
Well, for one thing, I want to ask all of your viewers to hopefully keep writing in as well as to what your vision for a just climate would look like. Without the vision, it's really hard to do the work. And I think I want to speak to my reaction about the war is I have to admit there is despair. If we can't figure out right relationship with each other as common species, it is hard to envision us being able to be in right relationship with the rest of the planet. And if we treated each other better, the relationship with our planet would be better. But it is the work of the church to figure out how to work well together. And we do, I guess what I want to encourage religious leaders is that I think there's so much business to be done in the work of making sure a church doesn't close or having to deal with funerals and all of the things and business of church. I understand take up a lot of time. The more education we can offer those of us that see the connection between climate, environment, and our faith, and just taking care of neighbor, it doesn't have to be something other. It can just be woven into the life of your church, and recognizing for a religious leader that has a lot on their plate, the fact that this is a human rights issue. It's not, a polar bear and an ice cap issue. It is an issue that has to do with the people that you all serve. So I think it's important to keep that in mind, but that it's all of our responsibility to tell our religious leaders how important that is and how integral it is. So yeah, the vision part I think is important. I recently read something about the idea that as humans, we're unique in our ability to look forward, to be able to imagine, which is why we have wonderful things like a computer and, like eyeglasses, and we can imagine things. So we need to keep that vision in front of us to be able to imagine a better future together. And to be able to do that in a community of faith, though, is incredibly important. And even though I love the calls for more ambition for our religious leaders, I do think that everyone within churches, from being in the pew to behind the pulpit, needs to encourage our religious leadership that that's why we need them to lead us, but also understand that within our individual lives and our discipleship as people, to remember that right relationship with what we use is also part of our work.
Thank you.
Yep, climate justice, and it couldn't have been better.
Seems like today.
Phoebe was the right person. Yeah, we got on the show today. She was able to also get a couple to answer some climate justice questions, not just asking all the questions. Yeah.
Yeah, before Phoebe gave her parting statement, let me just do a follow-up.
Mhm.
I think religious leader, we as citizens of this country, we should know what our government is doing when it comes to the issue of climate change. So you will not speak like you don't know what you're doing, because there are a lot of policy documents that government come up with, and then it's like no one to keep them to that fit in showing that these policies are implemented. Like the issue of the Elijah talk about COP, that's the Conference of Parties. It's a United Nations convention. And at that convention, Liberia is signatory to that convention. And at that convention, the Paris Agreement was signed, of which Liberia signed the Paris Agreement. And under the Paris Agreement, Liberia came out with a policy document called the NDC, the National Determinant Contribution. And in that document, there are now sectors. We got the health, we got the waste. And these sectors are sectors that Liberia have decided to engage in for now, the 2030, in showing that the issue of climate change has been reduced. So as religious leaders, we need to know all of these in helping our government, or putting them to like fit in showing that these sectors or these policies are implemented. Now, when I talk that document, one of our week on Phoebe sent our note, and I searched for Liberia. And when I talk ours on the NDC, when you open the document, you will see dialogue with youth group, dialogue with the women, dialogue with civil society, but I did not see dialogue with faith-based organization. So my question was, but then what is a faith-based organization contribution when it comes to the issue of climate change in our country? What can we do as a church, or what are we doing as a church to contribute when it comes to the climate impact of our country? So these are documents or policies that we need to know, and we need to be part of in making these policies that we will hold government accountable to these climate issues or these policies. There are a lot of violations when it comes to climate change, a lot of violations. So we all sit, and at the end of the day, we all suffer. We all suffer it. So we all need to get involved. We need to get involved. Like I was telling Woody, one of my boss at the office, one of our bosses at the office, he was one chair in the climate secretariat. So when he talked about Phoebe, I said, okay, then after Phoebe, will arrange him to come from the EPS standpoint or from the national government standpoint, and let him disclose some of the things that national government is doing in ensuring the issue of climate change. Those climate impacts are reduced as about this time what the Paris, all of them signed up to this Paris agreement. Yes. So there's a lot more to be talked about when it comes to this climate change and climate justice. And we all need, like the issue from the faith-based side, they talk about Genesis chapter 2, where we all talk about creation. God gave us the dominion over everything to take care of it. But you look at the other side, are we really taking care of what God gave us? We are not taking care of it. We are not taking care of God's creation. So it is the responsibility of you and I to do that. So the church really need to get involved in this climate justice issue. Yes. So I just want to
Wonderful.
provide that little information.
Yes, and
Wonderful. Yeah.
Amen.
That's from a
yes,
specialist
yes,
perspective.
yes,
Yeah, we got,
uh,
yeah,
yes,
We don't
and-
need my closing statements. Corporo did
yes,
it.
yeah,
oh really? She
exactly.
did?
Yes, she. Uh,
Wonderful. Couple, you nailed it. Yeah. So
Nailed
we
it.
will give it up for you, couple.
yes.
Right. Uh-huh.
And that is
And
it. Yeah.
Willie,
Yeah.
just wanted to
I just want to
yeah.
add that I'm glad that Phoebe and the entire program agreed that Sis Corpo and I can work together. We've come a long way. We've worked together from the youth and in our adulthood. We are still working together closely. So we're not really gonna say a whole lot much, but we are in consultation with our church. We are working on things in the back end with our church, and hopefully we are hoping, praying, and hoping that at this conference, the International African Lutheran Conference, um, the church will be launching um, the climate justice and faith initiative project in Liberia. So we are
wonderful.
working.
That's big
Yes, we are
news.
working and we are praying
That's
about it.
big news.
Yes, we are in touch with our church leaders, most especially our bishop. Our bishop have been very, very much receptive. We want to say this publicly. Bishop Patmo have been very receptive, and once we approached him about the issue, and he told us, in fact, I will just say this quickly. we had a thought to go a different route, and he said, "Listen, the journey of the 1,000 miles begins with the first step, and you will start in your own home. So we're gonna start right here first. So, by the International African Lutheran Conference, we are gonna take one day during that time to launch this program. We just want to, add
This
this
is
on.
big news. This is big news, Willie. Yeah, congratulations. And I
Thank you.
mean,
Thank
I think we were just conversing in the right direction. Everything we were saying about the church leveraging the kind of information that Phoebe provided. Yeah, some efforts are already underway, and the fact that the program is going to be officially launched at the International African Lutheran Conference is going to give it that visibility. Yeah, that's quite encouraging. But this is what I wanted to add before we close, folks, that I think scripturally, Jesus called all of us to action by telling us to do justice to our fellow men. I think that's what Jesus did. And we all, as Christ followers, should be able to do exactly what Jesus asked us to do. And there are some scriptural references to that. For example, Psalm 82, verse 3, chapter 82, verse 3. And it says, give justice to the weak and the fatherless, maintain the right of the afflicted and the destitute. So, in context, Jesus is not just talking about us engaging with them human to human. Jesus is also calling on authorities who have the economic power, who are having mandates to ensure the well-being of everyone, to create the necessary environment, make our environment accessible, livable by everybody. How you can protect the forests, how you can ensure that our rivers, our waters are not polluted, how you can ensure a good hygiene for your people, the community is safe, we are protected from diseases. I think these are the critical, the cardinal responsibilities of our leaders. And it's not just our political leaders, it's also our church leaders who have this greater responsibility to ensure that we have a safe and secure environment that every one of us can live in happily. We can be very assured that there is peace, there is harmony. So I think from that realistic perspective, if we do that, then we are ensuring climate justice. So Again, folks, this has been another episode of MLC Talk. It's been great having Phoebe on today, Phoebe Morad. She provided so much insight, about climate justice, the intersection of climate justice and faith. And also Kopo and Willie. I think we had 3 guests today. I was the only panelist. we got 3 specialists on the show. We got Kopo, we got Willie, and we have Phoebe, who actually fed us with sufficient information. And the fight that the bishop has started, from what Willie said, just by launching, the climate justice program in Liberia at such an auspicious event, a huge event. That's a continental event, so this means a lot for the Lutheran Church in Liberia. Phoebe, we want to say thank you for accepting our invite to sit with us. This will not be the last time that we'll be reaching out to you to sit with us again. Until then, this has been MLC Talk.